Unine, welcome back to Lord of the Flies. We're going into the jungle today, following Ralph and Jack and Simon. Humiliation was embarrassment. You'll remember that Jack didn't achieve enough votes for him to be voted as chief. Ralph did, though, and he helped Jack overcome his humiliation. If you remember how he did that, please write it down. Something that Ralph offered Jack to save face. For him to save face. Animosity, then. Animus in Latin is life or mind, and animosus means bold-spirited. So you have an enthusiastic mind for something, but not a very good thing, because animosity means enmity or a strong feeling of dislike and opposition. So if you feel animosity towards somebody, it's a hostile feeling. And we're going to look today at how the island feels hostile towards the boys in response to their destructive nature. So task number 1, write about how Golding conveys the boys' destructive nature in the extract we're about to read, and how the island responds with animosity. Remember, William Golding creates the island as a sort of character full of symbolism and mood. And finally, what do you remember about the writer's views on law and society? You may need to go back to lesson 1 to have a look at the context. So in today's lesson, you will know how Golding raises tension between the boys and the island. We're only going to read pages 12 and 13, so let's hop out of PowerPoint and hop into Word. I'm making a few mistakes because it's been a while since I've done this sort of business, and I hope everything is audible. So let's look at some language first. You'll remember that Piggy was left behind to, he's been ostracized, partly because he has, doesn't have the stamina for a trek like this, but also because he's left outside the world of glamour. He's a different class. And Jack, really. And he's intelligent, and he's been left behind to take a list of names and so on. All the most mature on the island, as some of you have said. So let's look at some language. William Golding uses quite a lot of cryptic words, in my opinion, but let's decrypt them now. Askew means lopsided or tilting or not straight. Diminishingly means shrinking. Surmounted means placed on top of. Sur is on, mounted. Pliant needles are flexible needles, so these are plants that are sharp yet have some give in them. Foliage, as you know, is undergrowth and bushes, shrubs, and so on. That's page 12 dealt with. We're going to talk about the boys being immured by foliage. Immured. Mur, what's mur in French? Le mur, is it la mur? Le mur? I don't know. Anyway, it means wall. So immured means walled in. Communion, prefix com, company, combine, it means together. So communion means a coming together. And a defile is a gap in something. Pendulum, if you suspend something, it's dangling. So pendulum means stop there. The three boys are exploring. They've decided to find out whether the place they've crash landed on is an island. If it's an island, then they'll have to wait and stay put. If it isn't, perhaps they could join them on their exploration. Without Piggy, the three boys walked briskly on the sand. The tide was low, and there was a strip of weed-strewn beach that was almost as firm as a road. A kind of glamour was spread over them and the scene, and they were conscious of the glamour and made happy by it. They turned to each other, laughing excitedly, talking, not listening. The air was bright. Ralph, faced by the task of translating all this into an explanation, stood on his head and fell over. When they had done laughing, Simon stroked Ralph's arm shyly. They had to laugh again. "Come on," said Jack presently. "We're explorers." "We'll go to the end of the island," said Ralph, "and look round the corner." "If it is an island." Now, toward the end of the afternoon, the mirages were settling a little. They found the end of the island quite distinct and not magicked out of shape or sense. There was a jumble of the usual squareness, with one great block sitting out in the lagoon. Seabirds were nesting there, like icing, said Ralph, on a pink cake. "We shan't see round this corner," said Jack, "because there isn't one, only a slow curve. You can see the rocks get worse." Ralph shaded his eyes and followed the jagged outline of the crags up toward the mountain. This part of the beach was nearer the mountain than any other they had seen. "We'll try climbing the mountain from here," he said. "I should think this is the easiest way. There's less of that jungly stuff and more pink rock. Come on." The three boys began to scramble up. Some unknown force had wrenched and shattered these cubes, so that they lay askew, often piled diminishingly on each other. The most usual feature of the rock was a pink cliff surmounted by a skewed block, and that again surmounted, and that again, till the pinkness became a stack of balanced rock projecting through the looped fantasy of the forest creepers. Where the pink cliffs rose out of the ground, there were often narrow tracks winding upward. They could edge along them, deep in the plant world, their faces to the rock. "What made this track?" Jack paused, wiping the sweat from his face. Ralph stood by him, breathless. "Men?" Jack shook his head. "Animals." Ralph peered into the darkness under the trees. The forest minutely vibrated. "Come on." The difficulty was not the steep ascent round the shoulders of rock, but the occasional plunges through the undergrowth to get to the next path. Here, the roots and stems of creepers were in such tangles that the boys had to thread through them like pliant needles. Their only guide, apart from the brown ground and occasional flashes of light through the foliage, was the tendency of slope. Whether this hole, laced as it was with the cables of creeper, stood higher than that. Somehow they moved up. Immured in these tangles, at perhaps their most difficult moment, Ralph turned with shining eyes to the others. Wacko, wizard, smashing, the cause of their pleasure, was not obvious. All three were hot, dirty, and exhausted. Ralph was badly scratched. The creepers were as thick as their thighs and left little but tunnels for further penetration. Ralph shouted experimentally, and they listened to the muted echoes. "This is real exploring," said Jack. "I bet nobody's been here before." "We ought to draw a map," said Ralph, "only we haven't any paper." "We could make scratches on bark," said Simon, "and rub black stuff in." Again came the solemn communion of shining eyes in the gloom. Wacko, wizard. There was no place for standing on one's head. This time Ralph expressed the intensity of his emotion by pretending to knock Simon down, and soon they were a happy heaving pile in the underdusk. When they had fallen apart, Ralph spoke first. "Gotta get on." The pink granite of the next cliff, was further back from the creepers and trees, so that they could trot up the path. This again led into more open forest, so that they had a glimpse of the spread sea. With openness came the sun. It dried the sweat that had soaked their clothes in the dark, damp heat. At last, the way to the top looked like a scramble over pink rock, with no more plunging through darkness. The boys chose their way through defiles and over heaps of sharp stone. "Look, look!" High over this end of the island, the shattered rocks lifted up their stacks into chimneys. This one, against which Jack leaned, moved with a grating sound when they pushed. Come on, but not come on to the top. The assault on the summit must wait while the three boys accepted this challenge. The rock was as large as a small motor car. Heave, sway back and forth, catch the rhythm. Heave, increase the swing of the pendulum. Increase, come up and to bear against the point of furthest balance. Increase, heave. The great rock loitered, poised on one toe, decided not to return, moved through the air, fell, struck, turned over, leapt, droning through the air, and smashed a deep hole in the canopy of the forest. Echoes and birds flew. White and pink dusk floated. The forest further down shook, as with the passage of an enraged monster, and then the island was still. Wacko, weow. Not for 5 minutes could they drag themselves away from this triumph. But they left at last. So that is where we'll stop reading. Leaving the forest resonating with the fallen boulder. Oh, while we're still here, are we still here? No, we aren't still here. Anyway, the pliant needles were actually the boys themselves. Forgive me, the boys were the brown needles threading their way through the creepers. So let's go back into PowerPoint. Bear with me. I just want to make sure I switch the sound on, because this is it's a little frustrating if I forget to do that. And why do you need sound, folks? Because there is a video summary of what you've just seen. Have a look, and I'll see you on the other side.
Oh my god. That's it, we're out of here.
Golding was onto something, wasn't he? Men away from civilization, climbing mountains, don't just do it for the recognition or the challenge of being high up. They're looking for stones to throw off ledges. That was news to me. Imagine carrying a length of timber 2,000 feet into the air just to wedge it underneath a boulder. And interesting. So write about how Golding conveys the boys, which means shows the boys' destructive nature and the island's animosity in response to that destructive nature. What do you remember about William Golding's views on law and society? I won't leave you hanging. Let me give you some models. You could say, well, I've left the question open. Write about how Golding conveys, which means you could just give us an example if you like, or explain it a little. Golding conveys the boy's destructive nature when Jack speaks of hunting pigs. He doesn't actually in this extract, but you could write that as an example. The island's animosity is shown when a tsunami appears, which represents anger, perhaps, and birds start to screech. Again, I think there's some activity with birds. could write about. William believed that good society, what did good society depend on? Go back to lesson 1, or your notes from lesson 1. You could develop it a little, perhaps. What about the pigs? The hunting pigs' ambition represents their violent nature, the boys' violent nature emerging. Now they're free from civilizing influences like teachers and parents. And the second point about the island's animosity represents the island's displeasure and symbolizes the offensive, destructive behavior that men are capable of in the natural world. And here are 3 points about William Golding to jog your memory, as well as his belief that good society was founded on something. William Golding believed that men create evil like something that bees do, and William Golding believed that without laws, what happens to evil? This is all. He's developing that idea that good society breaks down if men don't cooperate with each other, and it's in our nature to do wild things like chucking rocks and play fighting when we're away from polite society. So that's it. Look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you again soon.